This is a 2015 Ford Explorer with a naturally aspirated 3.5 doing the water pump on. This one is driven off the timing chain. I had another video made and it was for a Ford Taurus, and they are both the same procedure. I deleted that video on accident, so I'm making another one. Basically just going to pull off your valve covers, intake manifold, and you know, fuel line and some other shit. Over here we're going to pull the motor mount off. Support the motor coming off the support there, wrap the chain around the exhaust manifold, and then put a block of wood to keep it off the camshaft. So you're going to need to be rotating this motor over when you get it all apart. There is one hidden bolt here on the timing cover, right down here, 8mm head. I think that's the only 8mm head. Remove that. And then there is one 15mm head bolt that you want to remove before lifting the motor up, right there on the bottom, or else it'll hit the body there. The harmonic balancer press fit, you're going to use the silver fingers with the shortest rod to remove that. You do not have to do anything with the AC compressor or the alternator. Those can stay in place. This cover is RTV to the engine, and you're going to pull it out the top. You need to undo the air conditioning line. The suction line is going to be in your way. When you're going back in with it, it's going to be very tight on the RTV. In the last video I said it's probably best to put the RTV on the engine, not on the timing cover. When you do get this thing all pulled apart, you do need to pull all 4 oil control solenoids. That gives you access to be able to get these chains off. The primary chain here, you can't get it off with these oil control solenoids in the way, if I remember right, and you're going to need to pull them off to get the tensioners and whatnot for the secondary chain off. The lift here is supported on the lip over here and on the other side of the fuse block right there. It's got a lot of tension to lift this motor like this at the angle it's going. The large 15mm head bolt that goes right under this lip here, it will pull out when you lift it up high enough with the jack. The other 2 pull out before you lift the engine up. To turn the motor over, you can just put the bolt in without the washer. It will not bottom in the crank. The flange will draw up to the crank. Impact it just a little bit to tighten it down. Now you can turn the motor over. Now what you want to do is rotate the engine over until the dots on the phasers, the intake phasers, are pointed almost straight up. That aligns these holders here with the camshafts. But you have to remove the oil rail that goes from here and here and here. 3 bolts. Pull those rails off in order to get this on here. 1 for each side. Loosen all 4 phaser bolts before you take any of the chains or tensioners or whatnot off. That way the chains and the tools will help hold the cams. I did not have to back up the cams with a wrench, but if you want to, you can stick, I think, a 1-inch wrench on the camshaft. The bolts are Torx Plus, and they are a T55. To get the primary timing chain off, take your tensioner and your tensioner guide off, then take the other guide off. And then pull the chain off the water pump here, and you'll have enough slack to barely, you have to bend it quite a bit at like a 45-degree angle to get between the phasers here. You can get the chain out of there, and then you can pull these black plastic guides off. Okay, I was actually wrong about this guide right here. In order to get it off, apparently you have to pull this phaser off because the bolt is right behind it. You might be able to get it out with a small ratcheting wrench, but I think it's going to end up backing up against the sprocket. But that's okay, because you're going to be pulling these off anyways, because you're going to be doing the secondary chains, which I highly recommend you do not skip. This one's been very well maintained, no sludge, and the guides are just completely worn out, or at least the one up top is. But to get them off, just pull the bolts and rock them off. It does say something in the manual. You can insert a tool to keep this tension down while you remove them. There's no point, because you're going to junk it anyways. To pull them off, the new ones, when you push them in there and put the chain on, after you're done putting the chain on, you just push down and it pops up, and that tensions the chain with the new one. So you don't have to worry about that special tool. These phasers, they are pinned to the camshafts, so you're good. Now on the actual secondary chain timing, they're universal. So you got your two colored links, and on the back of the sprocket here, so here's the intake sprocket, exhaust sprocket, we got an L, that stands for left hand side of the engine, and an R will be right hand camshaft for the exhaust. So you would just line up the colored link with the dot, and the other colored link with the L for left side of the engine, and vice versa for the right side. Secondary chain tensioner shoes. The bottom one here, the little plastic one that you see right there, you just grab that and pull it off. And then to get the tensioner part out, you're going to stick your finger up here and push while you're pulling on that at the same time. It takes quite a bit of force. Got two O-rings. It will pop right out of there. So now you can get to the water pump. Just a bunch of bolts, and then it's stuck on there pretty tight. This one is. Take smallest indexable pry bar and pry right there, making sure not to mess this gasket surface for the chain tensioner. The other pry point that I used was right there, and then there's one more up top that's an actual pry point that you can use. The new tensioners here, they come with this little blue plastic piece. That's just so it doesn't pop down when you push in, because you're going to be pushing on this plastic piece to push it down in there. Once it's down in there, you can go ahead and remove the blue plastic piece. Now when you put the cam chains and sprockets on, all you have to do is push down, which is what this blue clip was preventing you from doing. When you push down, it unlocks it and it pops up, springs back up, tensioning the chain. On the bottom here is the shoe that you're going to put on after you drop the tensioner down in the bore. And if you'll see, the shoe does have a little cutout here that would go towards the engine to slide on. And of course the tensioner itself, the larger ears, they would go to the back. The cams might not line up with phasers at first. This one didn't. I had to stick a wrench on the cam and turn it a little bit. They do slip in these holders somewhat, and it doesn't take much to where this won't line up. So once you push them on, just push down on the chain, it activates the tensioner. To put the primary chain on, first wrap it in between the sprockets. It's got to be a 45-degree angle, of course. The pink one can be lined up with that dot. Then wrap it around the water pump first. And wrap it on the other side of that guide, just like that, and then drop it down in between the sprockets and whatnot, and line up the gold with the dot, and then wrap it around your crank. That's where you have the two gold links. Wrap that there, and then you can go ahead and put your tensioner and the tensioner guide on. The cam phaser bolts, I definitely recommend torquing them, and use new bolts, of course. They're pretty damn tight from the factory. So you're going to do 18 foot-pounds, loosen them. Then you're going to do, 30 foot-pounds, loosen, 18 foot-pounds, and then 180 degrees. When doing the final torque 180 degree on those phaser bolts, don't rely on the primary chain to hold the thing from turning, because it will end up slipping a tooth on you, or it did me, I guess. And when it did slip, the tensioner here, I saw it flick, so maybe it wasn't tensioned all the way, I don't know, but just hold it with a wrench while you're torquing them. There's plenty of room to put the RTV on the block and then drop the cover in here. That's probably the best way. But you want to put RTV here, here, there, and then there's another one right here. But there's 4 places where it has bolts that pass through. You need to put RTV there as well. Before going back on with the timing cover, you want to take the vacuum tool and stick the hose down in that little passageway there. There's going to be a bunch of oil. Suck that out as much as you can. Then on that side, right there in that pocket, it has lots of oil, and that ends up leaking down. So suck that out, and then before you put the time cover on, stick a couple rags in there against where the oil likes to run out, and then you can pull those off after you put the time cover on there. There will be one at the rear too. So on the bottom where the cylinder head here connects to the block, that little parting line, it will have oil that seeps between the cylinder head and the block here. That pocket that I was showing you was up here, but it'll still seep out between here, so that's why you gotta suck that dry. And then when you go, like you can see that little gap there, it'll have oil coming out there. So I'd recommend, even when you suck that dry, and when you go put RTV on this thing, put a little glob and smear it in there a little bit before putting RTV on this. That way any oil, it will slow it down from leaking out. And that's going to be true on both sides. There will be the front side. It'll seep out between there. First time sticking the balancer on, it hit like a hard spot, and I thought that maybe the crank gear hadn't lined up with the dowel pin, or I mean the keyway or some shit. So I took it back apart and didn't find anything wrong. These balancers are just very hard to get on sometimes. With the shorter crescent wrench, you really got to get on it to get that balancer on. That's a fully bottomed balancer.